Hey, welcome to this week's Thursdays with Mike. I'm actually taking you with me on a walk today. I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, right before I left for Maryland, to be back here on the NIH campus. It was Church Pulse? David Kinnaman and Carey Nieuwhof, I believe it is. They were interviewing Andy Crouch, who's the author of TechWise Family. His daughter has a book coming out. Oh, look at this. I'm just giving them marvelous advertising here. But she's got a book coming out in November called My TechWise Life. And it was a good conversation. I mean, if you want to find Church Pulse, it's like episode 26, I think, released on September 16th. And one of the points that was raised specifically in an increasingly digital age, kind of a dynamic that has been escalated by our current cultural conditions, worldwide conditions as far as pandemic and what have you, since we're increasingly living a digital life. It was one of the last questions asked, it actually was, what are some of the things we can do, strategies for right now, in the midst of an increasingly digital life? And of course the answer for some is just, cut off all technology, which means, so I'm not talking to you because you're not watching this. His answer was, actually, as we increasingly live a digital life moving forward, it's essential that we have a non-digital life to back it up. And that involves things such as, for instance, the very basic practice. He does not check in with his phone. This is Andy Crouch. He does not check in with his phone in the morning, first thing. He goes outside, after that first stop you need to make in the morning in another room, and, he'd get some tea going, but then he would step outside, and said even just 15 seconds is like he's checking in with creation, checking in with the day. And it could be a glorious day, it could be beautiful. I characterize this as beautiful. It's not hard for me to go out on these walks, even when it's overcast and drizzly. It's like, there's a nice variation on a theme. But yeah, if it's smoky, if it's inversion, if it's cold, if it's blizzard, if it's breezy, if it's sunny, doesn't matter. It's checking in with creation as a creature. And that's his first check-in. Creation, creator, creature, all intersecting. And that's just a little step in developing a non-digital life to back up the digital one. Otherwise, we just die as human beings in front of the screen. That was his warning. So, taking these walks, which is a very natural thing, for me, I'm just reminded as we're heading into the Gospel of Mark of just how much apprenticeship, discipleship, kingdom life with Jesus was on the move. I mean, have you noticed that yet? In Mark, as we're reading, Jesus comes to the Jordan and is baptized, and then he's off into the wilderness for 40 days, where he is tempted by the adversary, and he's with the wild animals, and angels encountered him there. He encountered them, and they ministered to him. They basically fed him when that time of testing was at an end. I meet squirrels and deer a lot here, and robins. Occasional person masked that doesn't make eye contact, but anyway, he encountered the wild animals, and the angels ministered to him. And then he's off walking along the Sea of Galilee, which is where he finds Peter and Andrew actually mending their nets. Goes on a little bit further, finds James and John in the boat with their father, and then he's walking into Capernaum, and he's in the synagogue, and then he's going to Simon Peter's house and heals Peter's mother-in-law, And then the whole town is at the door. And then before it's light the next day, Jesus is moving out into the wilderness, and his disciples come to him and they say, hey, everyone's looking for you. Basically, come back. They want to have a big event, essentially. They want you to hang out here. I mean, he could start something, right? I mean, he could like build his own Jesus synagogue or something. But he says, no, that's not why I've come. I must go to the other towns and villages as well. He was meant to be on the move. Apprenticeship is something on the move. And so we see him walking on the roads, encountering a leper, stopping at a house. It overflows with people, and soon the roof is coming to part as someone is lowered through the roof to him. Then he's walking by a tax collector's booth, has a conversation, ends up with a party in that person's house, and then they're walking through grain fields. But I mean, you get the flow. Discipleship, apprenticeship, is something that happens on the move. It's not static. It's actually quite kinetic in nature. Sometimes I've had people come to me and say, hey, would you mentor me? And I always kind of look at them well, first of all, it kind of scares me when somebody says they want me to mentor them. But I always just ask, okay, what do you think that looks like? Is that us sitting and just talking? And I suppose that could be part of it. They did sit in a house with crowds of people and so forth. There was lots of conversation. And so much of Jesus' teaching ministry happened at the table, not at a pulpit, which is another observation we will make as we carefully, thoughtfully read through the Gospel of Mark and the other Gospels. But being a mentor isn't just sitting and talking about being a mentor. Mentoring happens on the move. Apprenticeship happens on the move. A few years ago, actually a good number of years ago, that's like 10 years ago. Okay, that's more than a few. So a good decade ago, a young student from Northwest Bible College, she was pursuing she was pursuing her Bible education, I think an MDiv and what have you, and it was her summer off, and I actually had just known her as a child. Her oldest sister was a friend of my oldest daughter, so we knew the family, and I just known her as a little redheaded girl. And now she's bigger, older. And she showed up when I was still managing the bookstore at the church, and she said, I've got the summer off of school. I'd like to learn Hebrew. And I said, well, that's a fun way to take the summer off school while you're working 2 jobs and taking a break. You want to learn Hebrew. I said, great. And so we did. I started tutoring her in Hebrew, became a weekly thing, and then she wanted more. She wanted to. Well, she didn't. I don't think she ever said she wanted me to mentor her, but in essence, that's kind of what is kind of like the disciples following Jesus, the soon-to-be apprentices following Jesus, and Jesus turns and says, "What do you want?" And they said, "Rabbi, we want to see where you're staying." It's kind of that. So I showed her how to run the bookstore, which came in very handy when I had cancer and was going through chemo. She just took it over, and she did it. She did the inventory, and she ran that store, at least when she was there over the summer, which is when I was going through the initial chemo and such in 2012. But then she would, when she'd show up, I'd just take her with me to visit the sick, the grieving, and the dying. Very appropriate. We have like the siren happening right now. Yeah, that's what we would do. We'd move towards that. We'd move towards the pain, and she'd just come along with me and watch. And it was apprenticeship on the move. We never called it apprenticeship. We never called it mentoring. Didn't say she was my disciple. If anything, both of us were and are big Doctor Who fans, and so I was the doctor and she was Pond. So if anything, it was that, but we never called it apprenticeship or disciple. That probably would just made it weird. But as she continued on, she got her education complete, and she joined the Navy and then applied to be a chaplain, and was just recently made a chaplain in the United States Navy. And she just Facebook messaged me that I did this to her, that she holds me responsible because it was all of those times just in the going, in the movement, this kinetic relationship, this non-digital life that that she experienced as we just went and did and saw and encountered. And as she just watched what I did, she said, I just absorbed that, and that's what I now do. And now she's part of an elite group of women who are female chaplains in the United States Navy. So all of this to say, we need to connect with creation more. We need to go out and have walks along the lake where we encounter people and have conversations that can be challenging if they're wearing masks and they won't even make eye contact. So again, but this is also, it's the screen life and the non-screen life. It's learning how to have both of these together, develop both in healthy ways, find a symbiotic balance in them. But I like that practice that Andy Crouch mentioned, the importance of don't check with your email first, don't check for messages, and please, Lord, do not check in for the Facebook status thread and see who liked whatever you post last night first. Save it and get outside. Just step outside your door and take in creation, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You'll see all of it, and maybe take with you sometime a psalm like Psalm 104, which I read this morning. If I could just memorize it at a drop of a hat, I'd recite Psalm 104. I could look at it on my phone. I suppose I could do that, but I won't. But it's a creation psalm, just celebrating the presence of the Creator in the midst of a glorious creation in which everything works together. And it's all a result of the breath of God. It's just reframing our lives off of these limited screens into the larger reality of the world around us. I mean, I can focus while I'm here on that clinic across the way, where my granddaughter is still healing and hopefully will go home next week. I can focus on my very small space, the monotonous existence within the four walls of my room at the Children's Inn, which I'm actually very thankful for. And I can be focusing on what I can have, or I can just dive into screens. But the fact is, going out and taking a walk like this each day, a couple of times a day, is reframing life in the larger perspective. And I encounter angels in the forms of squirrels and robins and deer, oh dear. So anyway, I think that's it. So yeah, find a way to do that. Find a way to get on the move, reframe your life in the larger perspective, and learn to take a walk, and perhaps find a way to invite somebody else along and just see what happens. You might end up with a couple of fishermen. You might end up with a tax collector or a zealot, or ultimately a group of 12 that with whom you can experience life in the kingdom together. I think this ultimately is what the Gospel of Mark is pointing us to. If we read through the Gospel of Mark and we have not left our room and we're alone, sometimes these are not choices we have. Paul was alone in Philippians. But I'm talking about the choice to just stay with our screens and not to seek ways of getting out beyond. So hopefully you understand that. No guilt trip here. It's just the invitation of wherever you are. Sometimes it's easy, like here in Maryland, where many trees are turning And there's just so much green and vibrancy and life, and today blue sky and sun and a refreshing wind. Other days more challenging, and thus your exposure will be briefer. So anyway, find a way. That's it for this week. Probably one more here next week. Hopefully just one more here next week. And then back to Boise, where I can continue to practice the movements of discipleship, kinetic apprenticeship to Jesus there. And thank you for letting me join you where you are in this screen. Now, will you go outside? If you haven't been today, get on outside and take a walk, or just stand there and let this reframe you, that view, let it reframe you. And I will see you next time.